chaos as more than 100 lives are lost and many more injured in a shocking scene at a Gaza aid delivery. Russian President Vladimir Putin warns the West that sending troops to Ukraine risks triggering nuclear conflict. US political rivals target immigration as they vie for votes at the Mexican border. And a New Zealand judge awards millions to the families and survivors of the Whakaari White Island disaster. I'm Anton Enus. This is SBS World News. Good evening. It's the deadliest day that's been witnessed in Gaza in weeks. Palestinian authorities say more than 100 people were killed and 700 injured when people crowding an aid convoy were fired on by Israeli forces. The Israel Defense Forces has claimed self-defense, saying it only fired warning shots when people came too close to tanks escorting the convoy. It also says a crowd crush was to blame for most of the casualties. US President Joe Biden warning there's no doubt ceasefire talks will be complicated by the incident. The UN Security Council will hold a closed-door emergency meeting to discuss the events.
This video, broadcast by Al Jazeera Arabic, shows hundreds trying to get food from an aid convoy when the sound of Israeli forces opening fire causes a panic. The desperate need for aid in Gaza descending into deadly chaos. Israeli security officials released their own surveillance video that shows Palestinians encircling the vital supplies. They claim the flurry of shots heard intended as a warning to disperse the crowd.
We understand that a handful of people were injured, wounded, or perhaps killed in the warning shots that we fired towards the people.
One hospital in Gaza reported it received 12 bodies killed by gunfire and nearly 100 people injured by gunshot wounds. But Israel says people being trampled in the dense crowd and run over by aid trucks was mostly to blame.
The incident is still under investigation.
While the cause of the huge number of casualties is disputed, there are fears the scenes will make securing a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas even more difficult.
Are you worried that it will complicate these negotiations?
I know it will.
Aid groups say they have struggled to deliver adequate supplies to Gaza for weeks, their capacity severely restricted by ongoing hostilities.
These people died because humanitarian aid has not been able to be delivered in a safe manner. It is not safe for those people who deliver the aid. It is not safe for people who receive the aid.
All people in Gaza are at imminent risk of famine, and tens of thousands of people are missing, many presumed buried under the rubble of their homes. This is carnage.
But among the despair, one life miraculously saved. Starving, dehydrated and trapped under rubble for 9 days after his home was struck by an Israeli missile. A young boy rescued. Tom Stainer, SBS World News.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin has warned Western countries against sending troops to fight in Ukraine, saying they risk triggering a nuclear conflict. He was speaking days after France's President Emmanuel Macron said sending NATO troops to Ukraine should not be ruled out. Mr. Putin said Russia's arsenal had been significantly upgraded in recent years and that strategic nuclear forces are in a state of full readiness.
Mr. Putin's address comes just 2 weeks before an election that he's certain to win, but he still wanted everyone to hear what he had to say. The speech was broadcast live on billboards across Moscow, and cinemas interrupted their schedules to screen it, although it was no blockbuster. Much of the address focused on routine domestic matters. But while it was billed as a State of the Nation address, Mr. Putin also had a message for the wider world. Citing the French president's comments about sending troops to Ukraine, he said Western leaders didn't understand how dangerous their meddling could be.
We also have weapons that can hit targets on their territory. And what they're doing now, trying to scare the whole world, it does risk a conflict with nuclear weapons, which means the destruction of civilization. Don't they understand this, or what?
Mr. Putin praised the achievements of the military and said Russian forces now had the initiative in Ukraine. But Ukrainian forces are continuing to resist. They say they've managed to regain a village in the east of the country, taken by Russian forces the day before. In his speech, Vladimir Putin again portrayed the war as a fight for survival against a Western alliance bent on weakening Russia. That's the message Russians commonly hear. Coverage of the conflict is strictly controlled. On Thursday, the editor of the independent newspaper Novaya Gazeta, Sergei Sokolev, was detained and fined for discrediting the army in its reports. He said it was part of a plot to silence the newspaper. The US estimates that some 300,000 Russian soldiers have been killed or wounded in Ukraine. A moment of silence was held during Mr. Putin's address. Reaction from those attending was predictably positive.
I see that we are united, we all stand together, and we stand for our country and our leader. That's what I see in the hall today. That's what I see on the streets of Moscow. That's what I see in the streets of small cities and towns that got a lot of support from today.
That image of unity faces a key test tonight with the funeral of opposition politician Alexei Navalny, who died suddenly last month in an Arctic penal colony. Security is being stepped up ahead of the funeral. His supporters have urged people to attend. The Kremlin labelling such calls as provocative and warning that police will uphold the law. Nick Wells, SBS World News.
North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un has made a rare public expression of failure during a groundbreaking ceremony for a factory in Songcheon County north of the capital. Speaking to workers, he admitted to feelings of shame and regret for neglecting the country's rural economy, which he said lagged behind the capital, Pyongyang. A regional development policy was unveiled last month and aims to establish modern factories in at least 20 remote counties each year for the next decade. US President Joe Biden and his likely election rival Donald Trump have made competing visits to the US-Mexico border, both hoping to win over voters. Illegal migration is one of the key issues the November election will be fought over.
A border tour for the US president. Illegal crossings from Mexico have reached a record high under his tenure.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're going to get more resources.
As the White House considers executive action reminiscent of that from the Trump era, Joe Biden is still pushing lawmakers to reconsider a bipartisan border deal which failed last month.
It's time for the speakers and some of my Republican friends in Congress who are blocking this bill to show a little spine.
He had this message for Donald Trump, the driving force behind opposition for the bill.
You know and I know it's the toughest, most efficient, most effective border security bill this country has ever seen. So instead of playing politics with the issue, why don't we just get together and get it done? Let's remember who the heck we work for. We work for the American people, not the Democratic Party, the Republican Party.
The Homeland Security Secretary saying the department is resource-starved.
Only Congress can address our desperate need for more Border Patrol agents, field operations officers, immigration enforcement agents and officers, asylum officers, immigration judges, support personnel, facilities, and technology.
Around 500 kilometres up the border at Eagle Pass, Trump supporters filled the main street, hoping to catch a glimpse of the former president.
It's one of the most important years of elections due to the fact that the border crisis that we have here in our community.
Mr. Trump was inspecting the border fence with Republican Texas Governor Greg Abbott. The former president lapped up the attention.
They like Trump. Can you believe it?
Though his view of them is far from favourable.
Now the United States is being overrun by the Biden migrant crime. It's a new form of vicious violation to our country. They're coming from jails, and they're coming from prisons, and they're coming from mental institutions, and they're coming from insane asylums, and they're terrorists. They're being let into our country.
At this migrant camp in Matamoros on the Mexican side of the border, Advocates say the legal pathway is difficult to navigate.
Pues no hay manera de que le salga la cita. Ahorita son 6 meses con semanas que van a tardar para esperar la cita. Entonces, están aquí porque quieren entrar de forma ordenada, legal y humana, a como lo marca la ley.
There's no question illegal migration will be a dominant issue throughout the election race. Finding common ground much more difficult as these men march towards a likely rematch in November. Tanya Dandrinos, SBS World News.
A group of UN-backed human rights experts have accused Nicaragua's government of systematic human rights abuses. The accusations follow an investigation into the government's crackdown on political dissent. President Daniel Ortega's government has long pursued opponents, culminating in mass protests in 2018. Since then, political dissent has increasingly been met with violent repression, with the state targeting civilians both domestically and abroad. Haiti's already perilous security situation worsened overnight, with heavy gunfire paralysing the capital, and a notorious gangster named Barbecue declared he would overthrow the government. The move came during the absence of Prime Minister Ariel Henry, who is in Kenya to arrange for a multinational armed force to combat the gangs.
The familiar sound of rapid gunfire in Port-au-Prince. But Haiti's gangsters say this is no turf war. It's a battle for the country. The man behind it all, a gangster known as Barbecue, says he's unified Haiti's warring gangs to stage a revolution.
Premier objectif bataille nous c'est assurer nous que gouvernement Ariel Henry n'est pas sous pouvoir encore et que n'importe façon.
That may be because the Prime Minister is in Kenya, finalising a deal for a multinational security support mission to stop the gangs. Until they get to Haiti, people across the capital cower in fear, under desks, sending what could be their last message. Already displaced, the violence caught many by surprise. Barbecue says the Prime Minister, who's pledged to hold elections by August next year, is to blame. Barbecue's power grab may be triggered by the possibility that he'll be outgunned by the new multinational security force. While the UN has approved the mission to Haiti, it is not a formal mission and success will depend on resources. The UN is administering a trust to fund forces of countries deployed to Haiti.
Those countries are Bahamas, Bangladesh, Barbados, Benin and Chad.
Haiti's problems are cascading. It needs security assistance and humanitarian aid.
We see obviously a very steep increase in people that flee their homes. They have to abandon everything and basically either sleep on the street, be hosted by host communities, which already have very scarce resources.
Half the population desperately needs aid, and the UN does not have enough donor funds to provide it. Gary Cox, SBS World News.
A New Zealand judge has ordered companies involved in the 2019 Whakaari White Island volcano disaster to pay 10.2 million New Zealand dollars, that's about 9.5 million Australian, to the survivors and families of those killed. 22 people died, including 17 Australians, when the volcano erupted as tour groups visited the island. The 11-week trial was the largest action of its kind brought by New Zealand's workplace health and safety regulator.
But all breaches essentially flow from the failure to undertake adequate risk assessments.
An Auckland court with the difficult task of placing a dollar figure on the fatal decision that caused incalculable pain.
Move, move, move.
Everybody go.
Move. There is no way to measure the emotional harm survivors and affected families have endured and will continue to endure. Reparation in a case like this can be no more than a token recognition of that harm.
Today, Judge Evangelos Thomas said all guilty parties used an active volcano to make money as he handed down his sentence. The company held by the owners of the volcano, Fakadi Management Limited, ordered to pay $4.5 million in reparations and fined nearly $1 million for breaches of New Zealand's workplace health and safety laws. White Island Tours, the company operating walking tours on the volcano that day, ordered to contribute $4.68 million in reparations and fined nearly $500,000. A spokesperson for Ngāta Awa, who own White Island Tours, said the sentence reflected the severity of the incident.
We are deeply sorry about the whole incident and the suffering that's arisen out of it.
3 other helicopter tour companies found guilty last year were penalised smaller amounts. New Zealand's volcano monitoring agency, GNS Science, was also fined. Judge Thomas addressing the victim families and survivors in court today.
What has emerged clearly from the accounts that you have all provided is the extent, the depth, the intensity and the endurance of your suffering, physically, mentally and emotionally.
Their stories, he said, both heartbreaking and inspiring. Alexandra Jones, SBS World News.
Coming up, the battle to stop record fires spreading across Texas. The new criminal law in Ghana that sparked international alarm. And Australia slams Meta's about-face on using news content. At least 45 people have died and at least 20 are critically injured after a fire broke out in a 6-storey building in Bangladesh's capital, Dhaka. The fire began in a restaurant and spread quickly to other floors. 13 firefighting units took 2 hours to control the blaze, rescuing survivors by crane. All those admitted to hospital are in a critical condition with severe burns. Catastrophic fires burning across parts of Texas have killed at least 2 people and threatened to destroy more homes, cattle and livelihoods. The inferno at Smokehouse Creek is now officially the largest wildfire in Texas state history.
Holy cow.
The small town of Fritch, Texas, now charred and covered in ash.
It's kind of helpless.
Fritch was caught in a cross-section of several wildfires burning across the Panhandle. The largest of those blazes, the Smokehouse Creek fire, has burned more than 1 million acres so far in Texas and Oklahoma, making it the largest fire on record in the Lone Star State, officials confirmed Thursday. Add to that at least 4 other wildfires, burning tens of thousands of additional acres.
It's truly heartbreaking because their home is a symbolic of what's happened all over the county here.
Agricultural agent Andy Holloway estimates around 80% of the land in just one county has burned, and 5,000 heads of cattle have been killed, numbers that could rise in the region as damage assessments come in over the days ahead. And then there's the grim task of searching burned homes.
There's a chance that there may be people that did not survive and were trapped by the fire.
Several school districts have canceled classes for the rest of the week, with some now turned into donation drop-off centers.
It's really overwhelming just to see that outpouring of support.
As the firefighting efforts continue, there is one thing that cannot be touched by the flames.
The community's been through this before, and so, we pulled together then, and I know we'll pull together again.
Ivan Rodriguez reporting from Texas. A leading critic of Chad's military leader Mohamed Deby has reportedly been killed in a shootout with security forces. On Wednesday, heavy gunfire was heard near Yaya Dio's party headquarters in the capital N'Djamena. Mr. Dio's death comes after the government blamed him for a deadly attack on the country's security agency, an accusation he denied. As leader of the Socialist Party Without Borders, Mr. Dio was also a cousin of President Deby, who has been in power since 2021, and before his death was widely tipped to be a major opponent in the upcoming May election. The UN Human Rights Chief has called Ghana's anti-homosexuality bill, quote, profoundly disturbing. It seeks to criminalise LGBTIQ relationships or those with a non-traditional gender identity. The measure has made it through Parliament and is now awaiting presidential approval to be made law. And a warning, this report contains distressing images.
Ghanaian artist Angel Maxine fought a homophobic bill with what she knew best. Now as Ghana's most famous trance singer, she says she lives in fear, gets death threats from the public.
I'm scared. I'm really scared.
Ghana's parliament has unanimously passed a draconian anti-LGBT bill. It calls for jail time for Ghanaians identifying as gay or trans, criminalizes those who support them, requires citizens to turn them in.
I am heartbroken. I feel so bad. I feel bad because we have worked so hard to speak up against it.
Since 2021, the so-called Family Values Bill has been pushed by a coalition of politicians and faith leaders in Ghana, with support from US conservative groups. It's just one of several homophobic bills emerging in Africa. CNN has tracked a severe spike in the abuse of LGBTQ Africans, often put on social media, an epidemic of hate inspired by the laws.
There is nothing that deals with LGBTQ better than this bill that has just been passed by Parliament. We expect the President to walk his talk and be a man of his words.
After the unanimous vote, President Nana Akufo-Addo, a former human rights lawyer, will be under enormous political pressure to sign the bill. But his government is a significant recipient of US and European foreign aid. And Ghana has been on a push to draw foreign tourists to its shores with flashy advertising like this.
Not only is...
It's been a hugely successful campaign, especially with Americans. But it could all be under threat. And Maxine says she's almost out of hope for their future.
I won't allow my identity to be criminalized, and I'll still speak against it.
But you could be sent to prison.
Yes, I could be sent to prison. There's little time that we have right now. We have to speak against it.
Otherwise, Maxine and many others will be silenced.
David McKenzie reporting there. Iranian voters are heading to the polls to elect the country's next parliament and the powerful assembly of experts. The result is likely to be a foregone conclusion, given the tight control the Islamic Republic holds over who can run for office. But the way the election plays out and its significance may be different this time. Every 4 years, the public gets to vote for the 290 members of the Iranian parliament. The elections are the first in the country since a wave of mass protests in 2022, sparked by the death of Mahsa Amini while in the custody of the morality police. Striking doctors in South Korea have overwhelmingly failed to end a walkout by a deadline yesterday, with the government now warning of legal action. About 80% of the trainee workforce are protesting government plans to increase medical school admissions, an attempt to cope with shortages and an ageing society.
These junior doctors have been on strike for the past 10 days, but the South Korean government's patience appears to have run out. It has issued an ultimatum to more than 9,000 striking doctors: clock back in or face a 3-month suspension of their medical licenses and possibly a police investigation.
Today is the last day of waiting for the correct judgment and decision from trainee doctors. Desperate patients are in limbo, awaiting their surgeries, and severely ill patients who need urgent treatment are struggling to find a hospital that will take them.
With no meaningful solution in sight, the government is preparing contingency measures, including the deployment of military doctors trained in essential medicine. The walkout has shown little sign of a breakthrough.
We want the government to show the will to talk and unify its channel for dialogue, and immediately stop insulting trainee doctors and treating them like criminals.
This former intern doctor has tendered his resignation, which, like thousands of others, has been left unprocessed. Most of his striking peers, amounting to about 73% of South Korea's junior doctors, have kept their silence, turning to their seniors at the main doctors' lobby group to fight on their behalf.
대한의사협회 비상대책위원회는
The KMA Emergency Committee doesn't want the government to cross the Rubicon. If we fail to seize the opportunity, we will lose the Korean medical system, considered one of the best in the world, and neither doctors nor the people want to see the result of that failure.
The reason for the strike is unchanged. Doctors are against a medical policy package and a plan to significantly raise the number of new medical school entries by 2,000 next year, to get to 10,000 additional doctors within a decade, something the government maintains is non-negotiable.
But patient groups are angry, saying that each delay feels like a death sentence and that doctors need to return to their posts with no conditions attached. Meanwhile, President Yoon Suk-yeol's approval ratings have gone up, with a key election less than 2 months away.
That's Eunice Kim reporting from Seoul. The family of 19-year-old Kumanjai Walker has rejected a proposal from former Constable Zachary Rolfe to meet in private in an attempt at reconciliation. Zachary Rolfe had said he was willing to meet with the family, but would only do so in private to avoid further public spectacle. Lawyers representing the families today told the coroner none of them wished to have a private consultation with Mr. Rolfe, but were listening intently to what he said in court. Mr. Rolfe is the final witness to be heard, bringing an end to one of the Northern Territory's longest-running inquests. Final submissions will be made in May. The opposition leader says he will not push to have the identity of a former politician exposed as a traitor by the nation's spy agency made public. ASIO Director General Mike Burgess this week revealed an ex-politician, quote, sold out to a foreign power. He later released a statement saying naming the individual could expose sensitive sources. After suggesting the individual should be exposed yesterday, Mr. Peter Dutton says he respects the spy chief's decision.
Of course, I mean, you take his advice. If he doesn't want to provide the name on that basis, then we take his advice. The point that needs to be made, though, is that I just think we need to not lose sight of the issue that he's talking about, that is foreign interference in our country.
Well, the idea that any minister in my government will just go out against the wishes of the ASIO Director General, I find quite extraordinary. I have confidence in ASIO.
The person involved has not been charged, as foreign interference laws did not apply at the time. Anthony Albanese has paid tribute to serving Labor Senator Linda White, who died yesterday after a health battle. The Victorian senator and former trade unionist was elected at the last federal election. She's been remembered as a fierce advocate within the Labor movement.
Linda was formidable, a beloved friend, a valued colleague, a dedicated parliamentarian, and through all her efforts in the wider Labor movement, a devout supporter of working Australians. Linda made a difference.
Tomorrow, Melbourne residents in the seat of Dunkley will head to the polls in a by-election triggered by the death of Labor MP Peter Murphy. Both federal party leaders have left Canberra to join their candidates in the election for the final sprint.
There you go, mate. Nice to meet you.
Working pre-polls in Melbourne's southeast.
Thank you very much.
As voters acquaint themselves with Labor's candidate.
The bride to be? I hope so. A different Jody. My second favourite Jody.
But hoping to be Dunkley's first, selling the revised Stage 3 tax cuts and tapping in to the legacy left by the late Peter Murphy, who died of cancer.
I too will deliver for Dunkley.
She'll be a voice in government, not just be another bloke sitting behind all the other blokes in Peter Dutton's team.
With a last-minute endorsement from Australia's first female Prime Minister.
Vote for Jody. Vote for Labor.
I am the underdog, but Australia loves an underdog.
Nathan Conroy urging voters to leave Labor a message on the cost of living and crime.
People are sleeping with weapons next to themselves.
Debate turning to the coalition's weaponisation of immigration detainees released after a High Court ruling, one of whom was charged with sexual assault yesterday, the deputy opposition leader tweeting, "If you live in Frankston and you've got a problem with Victorian women being assaulted by foreign criminals, vote against against Labor. Hours later, Victoria Police revealed,
with further evidence, it is clear the person arrested is not the offender, and for that we are sincerely sorry.
But Susan Lee was not.
Susan, if Peter was still alive today, she'd be disgusted with you.
As a woman, I am not taking a backward step on this, and I'm calling it out.
Whether that rhetoric resonates will be tested at the polls. Both leaders are managing expectations ahead of this crucial test, aware the results could spell out their fortunes in the lead-up to a federal election.
Labor absolutely has to hold this by-election. They can't afford a loss. They've got 17 seats on a smaller margin than this. If they lose this, it starts to raise very serious questions.
Labor holds Dunkley by a margin of 6.3%, with a swing against the coalition at the last federal election.
This will be a tight result.
If there is a 3% swing against the government, that would be a devastating result for the Prime Minister.
The average swing against governments in by-elections is about 5%.
Yes, we're going to make it underline.
Polling centres to open at 8 a.m. Sarah Tomevska, SBS World News.
Telstra has apologised to the family of a Victorian who died during this morning's outage at a national 000 call centre. The network interruption lasted for more than an hour, during which time Telstra operators were unable to redirect emergency calls, with some having to email referrals to paramedics. The telco says it's investigating the incident. Police have arrested a 60-year-old man over sexual assault of at least 10 women in Sydney's Moore Park and the Inner West between 1991 and 1993. They used new DNA and fingerprint technologies before the arrest. A solemn vigil is being held tonight for Jessie Baird and Luke Davies. Reporter Alexandra Jones is there for SBS World News. Alex, good evening. To give us a sense of what the mood in the crowd is like there tonight.
Yeah, good evening, Anton. Well, it's certainly a sombre mood here. As you can see, there's hundreds of people gathered behind me for this silent vigil to commemorate the lives of Jessie Baird and Luke Davies. It's a public outlet for the grief shared not only by the family, friends and colleagues of the two men, but also by the broader LGBTIQ+ community and also the broader Sydney population who have been really shocked by the deaths of this young couple who were allegedly murdered by a serving New South Wales police officer in their home not far from here in Paddington. Now, the cause of their death is not the focus of this evening. The silent vigil has been organised to celebrate the lives of 26-year-old Jessie Baird, who was a television presenter and AFL umpire, and 29-year-old Luke Davies, who was a Qantas flight attendant. Now, people have been pouring in, laying flowers and also signing tributes in condolence books that have been placed by the organisers of this event. There's people have been telling us that they just wanted to come and pay their respects, and even some travelling from interstate because of the national reach of this story. And now the tribute is happening just around the corner from Oxford Street, where tomorrow night the Mardi Gras parade will take place. Now, the deaths of Jessie and Luke have prompted the organisers of the Mardi Gras parade to exclude the New South Wales Police Force from marching in uniform. However, everyone here just wants the parade to be another chance to commemorate and celebrate the lives of Jessie Baird and Luke Davies and honour their vibrant legacy.
That's reporter Alex Jones reporting from Sydney on that vigil taking place tonight. And final preparations are underway, with around 12,000 people expected to march in the annual parade.
The countdown is on. Sydney's glimmering spectacle is less than a day away.
We come together from a diverse range of communities with our true selves. We come together in celebration, joy, love and self-expression.
The 46th annual Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras will be a street party once again, with huge crowds and colour on the cards.
We make ourselves very, very visible in parade, in all our colours, in all our glory, in who we are and how we love to shape change and to shape all our futures.
By tomorrow, this street in Sydney will be filled with thousands of people celebrating gay rights and diversity. For some, though, this year's Mardi Gras will be a more sombre occasion.
We've also been a city and a community in mourning for beautiful and precious young lives lost.
Mardi Gras organisers today saying the deaths of Jessie Baird and Luke Davies is casting a shadow over the event. And many will use this event to grieve for the couple.
And a lot of people are in mourning. I have close friends who are close to the couple. It's been a really difficult festival. And again, we want to provide a safe space for people to express how they feel.
This year has also seen long-standing police tensions between the LGBTIQ community reignited.
That the New South Wales Police have a great deal of work to do to acknowledge and apologise sincerely for past crimes and to lift efforts to respond to the needs of the community today.
Police who choose to march this year are required to wear plain clothes. Diana Damjanovic, SBS World News.
A large sinkhole was discovered early this morning in southern Sydney. Drone footage showed a damaged two-storey office building sitting above the sinkhole and construction of the M6 motorway tunnel. Authorities said no one was injured and all workers were accounted for. It remains unclear whether the underground work is linked to the sinkhole. Facebook and Instagram parent Meta has announced it'll stop paying for Australian news content on its site and scrap its dedicated news tab. Catalina Flores joins us in the studio now with more. And Catalina, this comes as a blow to both publishers and the government.
Yeah, Anton, the decision effectively overturns a deal struck with the government back in 2021 under the News Media Bargaining Code, which ensured publishers were compensated for their journalistic content. Facebook is now saying it will not renew the contracts set to expire later this year, worth millions in revenue to Australian media companies. The ability for publishers to post to their own sites. In a blog post, Meta added that people don't come to Facebook for news and political content. The government has criticised the decision.
The decision undermines the viability of a healthy, democratic, open media. It removes a significant source of revenue to Australian news media publishers. As I said, Australian publishers deserve fair compensation for the content they produce and which is provided on Meta's platforms.
The government says it is taking every action available to it under the Media Bargaining Code. SBS is not included in the deal. Meta posted a profit of $14 billion for the December quarter and is currently the 7th most valuable company in the world. The nation's love for online shopping has driven a huge profit uplift at Australia Post. The country's flagship mail service recorded a $33.6 million profit for the half, up 42% year on year. That's as demand for parcels hit records with almost 100 million packages delivered. But the company says the long-term decline in its letter business and lower foot traffic in stores are still taking a toll. Chief Executive Paul Graham signalling more post office closures may be needed to consolidate a drop in over-the-counter transactions. Australian home values regained momentum in February as speculation around potential interest rate cuts spurs market confidence. CoreLogic says the improved sentiment delivered a 0.6% rise in February values, pushing the median dwelling price over $765,000. It follows strong gains in Perth, Adelaide and Brisbane as migration and more affordable pricing stimulate demand, while more expensive cities such as Sydney and Melbourne lagged.
I think the fact that we're still seeing values rising against those headwinds really just highlights the sheer undersupply of housing. People need to put a roof over their heads. We're still seeing vacancy rates generally around 1% or lower across most markets. So it doesn't really matter if you're a buyer or a renter, you're probably facing affordability pressures to some extent.
Values are expected to continue to rise, but CoreLogic says downside factors such as elevated unemployment, lower household savings and a cautious lending environment will keep a lid on the pace of growth for now. To the Australian share market, which ended the week on a high at a fresh all-time record. The ASX gained 0.6% overall, tracking strength in global markets.
We've been getting a pretty good earnings season thus far, which is now winding up. And of course, we've had softer data. We've had softer inflation data, retail sales data this week, and that heightens expectations of RBA rate cuts in the second half of this year.
Lithium miners did well on a commodity price gain while healthcare fell. BHP was also up as former NAB CEO Ross McEwen emerged as a contender for the chairmanship. But it was tracking app Life 360 that did best, surging some 38% on news it would introduce advertising to its free subscription tier. One Australian dollar is buying just over 65 US cents and is performing better against most other major currencies. And speaking of currencies, now is your chance to have a say about the design of the new $5 bill. The Reserve Bank is seeking ideas from the public about how best to replace the portrait of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth on the note. Submissions will be expected to include themes that reflect First Nations cultures and history and can be lodged online from today. And while some of the world's largest economies realise a slowdown in economic growth, India has emerged as an outlier. The country recorded an 8.4% lift in December quarter GDP, with momentum set to continue into this year. The OECD has forecast growth of 6.2% in 2024. That compares with lower global forecasts, including in Australia, where GDP is expected to expand just 1.4% over the year.
It's weak growth, basically. And you see it also because the unemployment rate, whilst it bounces around, in the last 6 months, it's gone from 3.5 to 4. And so I think, we're not expecting much better in the next 6 months.
NAB says it's expecting December quarter GDP to reveal the lowest annual growth rate outside of the pandemic since 2000. And we'll be standing by for the official figures along with some other key economic data next week, Anton.
Thanks, Catalina. Coming up, lifesavers reveal the summer swimming death toll. And some classic cricket chaos helps Australia take a grip in the first test. Men made up 80% of drowning deaths over summer. Surf Lifesaving Australia says across the country 5,700 rescues and 99 deaths were recorded, with 55 of those occurring on the coast. 60% of coastal drownings were in regional and remote areas.
We need to make sure that the public are aware of the dangers when they're going to the beach and to the waterway, particularly in those regional and remote areas that we don't have a life-saving service there. Stop, look, plan is really the key message that we're putting out.
Beaches will be patrolled for the next few months, including over the busy Easter holiday period. Sport now, and Cameron Green hit his biggest ever test score to put Australia on top in the first test in Wellington against New Zealand. An unbeaten 174 was the centrepiece of a record last wicket stand with Josh Hazlewood of 116. The home side was dismissed for 179 before 2 late wickets, including a Steve Smith duck, ended a frantic day of Test cricket.
New Zealand wanted to wrap up the tourists' innings early on day 2, but Centurion Cameron Green and number 11 Josh Hazlewood weren't in the mood to comply.
Oh, nicely down the ground.
Green did most of the heavy lifting to take the lead up to 300 with a 6.
Now he swings him to the onside, into the gap and away.
Hazlewood wasn't always happy playing second fiddle and stepped up to the plate when required.
Oh, gee, that's lovely.
Green reasserted his number 1 status in the partnership, clearing the fence to bring up his 150.
Gone for 6, what a way to bring up 150.
After a record century stand left the home team deflated, Hazlewood was the last to go.
In the air and gone.
Hopes of a revival hit rock bottom in the run chase, Mitchell Stark removing Tom Latham for 5. 1 for 12 soon became 2 for 12 as a bungled attempt to get off the mark by Kane Williamson ended in a farcical run-out.
Well, I cannot believe it.
The wheels were well and truly off when Rachin Ravindra sliced one to Nathan Lyon. Before New Zealand had reached 30, half the team was back in the sheds. It was only an 84-run partnership between Tom Blundell and Glenn Phillips that revived any hope of saving the test. Nathan Lyon took 4 wickets to restrict New Zealand to 179 all out. The home side's mini-fight back continued when Steve Smith was out for a duck in the first over.
Yes, he's got one!
Australia's hopes of stretching the 204-run lead slow to a crawl when Marnus Labuschagne went for two. Enter night watchman Nathan Lyon, and he could have gone on the last ball of the day. Tim Southey seething at letting it slip through his grasp. Australia's grip slipping slightly, but the tourists remain in control, ahead by 217 with 8 wickets remaining. John Baldock, SBS World News.
The Socceroos World Cup qualification hopes have improved after a venue change caused by the Middle East conflict. Graham Arnold's team will now play their away leg against Lebanon in Canberra instead of a neutral venue. The first leg is in Sydney on March the 21st. 5 days later, the teams will play the second leg at Bruce Stadium. It's the first Socceroos game in the national capital since 2019. The NRL kicks off on Sunday in Las Vegas, with South Sydney taking on Manly. And ahead of the opener, the Rabbitohs have taken time to share in local First Nations culture. While training in San Diego, the Bunnies spent yesterday morning learning about the traditional custodians on whose land they trained, receiving a traditional welcome from the people of the Kumyai Nation. The president of World Athletics, Seb Coe, has branded the idea of a proposed doping-enhanced games as moronic. Swimmer James Magnuson had said he would consider swimming in an event if the money was right. Coe scoffed at the prospect of the games even taking place.
There's only one message, and that is if anybody is moronic enough to feel that they want to take part in that, and they are from the traditional philosophical end of our sport, they'll get banned, and they'll get banned for a long time. So, hey, you know.
Meanwhile, the company that built the Athletes' Village for the Paris Olympics has handed over the keys to Games organisers. President Emmanuel Macron was given a tour of the 52-hectare site that will house over 23,000 Olympic and Paralympic athletes. Lewis Hamilton has led teammate George Russell to a surprise Mercedes 1-2 in practice for the season-opening Bahrain Formula One Grand Prix. It was a good day too for Australia's Oscar Piastri. He finished 5th in the second practice session in his McLaren. But the day belonged to 7-time world champion Hamilton as he lapped the 5.4-kilometre desert track fastest ahead of Russell. Reigning triple world champion Max Verstappen was 0.477 seconds off the pace. Coming up, the weather. And fond farewells for a hairy biker. One of the popular TV food show duo has died, aged 66. A lunar lander that ended up on its side has managed to beam back more images hours before it was shut down. Last week, Odysseus became the first ever commercial spacecraft to touch down on the moon, and the first US vehicle to do so since Apollo 17 in 1972. The Houston-based company confirmed the solar-powered lander was in sleep mode in preparation for the onset of a long, cold lunar night lasting 14 days. Intuitive Machines say they're hopeful of being able to restore communication with Odysseus when the sun reappears. Let's go to the forecast now. Areas of cloud cover the northern half of the country. There are extensive areas of convection cloud over southern WA and South Australia. Patchy cloud extends across coastal regions of New South Wales, Victoria and the western half of Tasmania. In the major centres, showers and a possible storm for Darwin. Sunny in Brisbane, a shower or two in Sydney, possible showers in Canberra, and morning showers in Melbourne. Partly cloudy in Hobart and Adelaide, a possible shower and easing winds for Perth. Looking further afield, partly cloudy in Apia, showers for Nadi, thunder in Papeete, partly cloudy in Noumea, windy in Wellington. In Southeast Asia, thunder in Bangkok, cloudy in Phnom Penh, thunder also for Kuala Lumpur and Port Moresby. Further north, fine in Beijing, clouds for Seoul, partly cloudy in Tokyo, drizzle in Taipei, clouds also in Hanoi but fine in Manila. Heading west, a few showers in Beirut, rain for Islamabad, thunder in New Delhi and partly cloudy in Mumbai. On to Europe now, rain in Stockholm, snow for Moscow, clouds for Berlin, rain in London, fine in Paris, more rain this time in Madrid. In Africa, fine in Casablanca and Cairo, thunder for Lagos, thunder also for Nairobi, partly cloudy in Johannesburg. In South America, cloudy in Caracas, partly cloudy in Bogota and Lima, thunder for Asunción and Buenos Aires. And for North America, rain in Los Angeles, showers in Vancouver and Toronto, rain also for New York and fine in Mexico City. Dave Myers, one half of the TV cooking duo, the Hairy Bikers, has died at the age of 66. Along with his friend Cy King, Myers travelled the world by motorbike, sampling and cooking food.
Biking and cooking, Dave Myers' two great passions, and his enthusiasm for food was infectious.
We bought this at the market today. Everything here is just done so nicely with such a little bit of love. And you know, you go down the market, you buy your bits and bops, and you just feel jolly for the rest of the day.
For 2 decades, he, along with Cy King, sought out quality cuisine, sometimes far away, sometimes closer to home.
I mean, where else could you get a sausage bap and some Chinese dumplings?
Welcome to dancing, buddy.
In 2013, he swapped fancy food for fancy footwork, taking part in Strictly Come Dancing. And later won admiration about the way he honestly spoke about his health struggles.
Yes, I've been having treatment for cancer, and it started in April. It's still ongoing, but I'm kind of doing all right. And, you know, it's like many people, it's something that one learns to live with. But I'm delighted with my hair. It's
fabulous hair.
I've got thicker hair than I had before I had the chemo.
Today, his on-screen partner, Cy King, said, "My best friend is on a journey that for now I can't follow. I'll miss him every day and the bond and friendship we shared over half a lifetime."
For me to be back doing this means the world to me. It really does.
His latest series is currently on BBC Two, giving viewers a last chance to enjoy his passion for food.
Lisa Mzimbo reporting there. Recapping our top story now. Palestinian authorities say more than 100 people have been killed and 700 injured after Israeli forces fired shots as people crowded an aid convoy. The IDF claims self-defense, saying it only fired warning shots, also blaming a crowd crush for most of the casualties. There are concerns abroad that ceasefire talks will be jeopardized by the event, with the UN Security Council to hold an emergency meeting to discuss the issue. And that's the world this Friday. You can catch up on our bulletins on SBS On Demand. And for the latest stories, head to the SBS News website. Catalina Flores will be here with the late news at 10:15. But for now, from the news team, a very good night.